All right, thanks for joining today, everyone. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy out there. As you can tell, Bruce and I will be using our webcam for this presentation. We're doing this just to help us feel a little bit more connected during these crazy times. So I would also like to mention we're using GoToWebinar to host our event today. So you should be seeing the title slide of today's presentation, as well as myself and Bruce on your screen. If not, you can send me a chat and I'll help you out with that. Also, along the right-hand side of your screen, you should see the control center. And in that control center, there are two places you are welcome to ask questions. One is under the chat panel and two under the questions panel. The final thing I need to mention is all microphones are muted by default at the beginning of this presentation. However, at the end of this presentation, you may click the hand icon at the top of your control panel and I will unmute you so you may ask your question. If you prefer to stay muted, you are welcome to type your question in the chat or question panel and I will ask on your behalf. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get things started. I'm going to turn it over to Bruce Ward, our VP, to talk about cybersecurity. Take it away, Bruce.
Thank you, Samantha. Coming at you from the home office today, as hopefully many and most of you are likely doing something similar. Welcome to This Month in Cybersecurity for March. Obviously, the theme this month will be pretty predominantly based around the idea of COVID and kind of moving forward on that. Now, I'm looking forward to having a discussion with you, about areas, and we sent out some bullet points in advance. Hopefully you saw that, but in general, we're going to be talking about the themes of remote access, impersonations that are obviously occurring around the coronavirus, and then phishing campaigns. And where possible, I'm just going to mix in, where I think we can, you can solve these things with solutions that are in the industry and either something that we offer or something that has been offered by other organizations. The bullet points that we kind of sent out is, let's just take a look at remote access vulnerabilities. So when I'm talking about that, that's, this idea that suddenly everyone rushed to home, right? And we're now operating off home networks. We're using, in some cases, BYOD devices, if you will. We're using VPNs that, oftentimes weren't necessarily designed to scale but there's some security measures around there and some vulnerabilities I want to talk about, RDP, Citrix, and so forth. So that's kind of the remote access piece. Then obviously, there's going to be a whole lot of impersonations going on, people seeking information and getting impersonated, who's legitimate, who's not, and we'll have some discussions around that and some of the threats that are going on right now. And then we'll also talk about phishing campaigns, right? Email doesn't stop, but it might pivot a little bit towards coronavirus, stimulus checks that are forecasted to come out. When there's money involved, that's obviously where cyber criminals like to insert themselves. Remote access, again, I won't belabor the point, but just to kind of highlight some of the things that are net new really for a lot of us as IT administrators is, this idea of home devices, right? Home devices weren't designed to be on our network, and we really hadn't planned for that. And in some cases, maybe you're leveraging those home devices, or even this corporate device that you used to might maybe see occasionally physically. With SneakerNet, maybe you did some things, or it was on your network and you were able to do patching. How is that happening? Things of that nature. So just reminding us about what pieces are involved here. Obviously, home networks and this idea of, a Linksys router being the traffic cop between, a device and your organization, or maybe being the tunnel into your organization as part of a VPN. So that's, VPNs are kind of net new for us, oftentimes on a scale that to which we're using it. Conference calling and conference platforms are brand new, right? And so we've actually got some interesting stories around those here today. And then, the one thing we're not finding, just like VPNs, maybe it's an afterthought. Right now, it's get the functionality working. And for the last couple of weeks, certainly we've seen a lot of that activity. But for VPNs, VPNs, you're supposed to have access control lists, right? To design where people are allowed to go, or maybe group that by various components. All employees shouldn't have all access to all aspects of your network. VPNs have ACL lists, and whether you've employed them or not, now might be the time to begin thinking about things like that. There's also capabilities to tie in the authentication that you're using with VPN, which today might be a separate login and password. There's advantages to having that tied in with your Active Directory through a Radius server. if nothing else, for logging, but also for centralization of the authentication experience. And as we're going to talk about today, maybe tying in multi-factor authentication. So a lot of things to talk about. Network security is kind of getting layered on here now after functionality, and that's completely understood. But these are new components, and they sometimes require some advanced thought. So to that end, I thought we'd just kind of chat about home networks for a moment. Home networks. So this is an interesting list. I pulled it up this morning, and this is valid through March. So feel free to use the list. Website's available there. But I mean, the story really is home networks were installed by by your employees oftentimes, right? Unless you had some home service, and your employees are the people that are asking you. They're the ones clicking on the phishing emails and so forth too. So it's very possible, if not likely, that home networks are protected by a router that has a default login and password on it. Okay, and default login and passwords are well known. There's a list of all the ones for Linksys. If you'd like another one, just hit your favorite search engine bar and find it. And so default login and passwords means that they're subject to being controlled. And in fact, the story I'm providing here is, even if the default password was changed on their router, those passwords can also be hijacked through brute force techniques, where they pretty much are guessing a password, and even if it's not the default, maybe it's an easy one, and they spray across 1,000 routers, and yep, sure enough, one of those 1,000 was using the password that I guessed, and so now they have access to that. And one of the things they're doing, this is an event that was highlighted in the GB Hackers. Again, look at some of the dates on some of these articles I found. A lot of these are from the last week, if not the last few days, in terms of vulnerabilities. So very recent information coming here. This is a coronavirus-based attack. They're basically going into routers, especially Linksys routers. They're hijacking the router, because they now have management credentials to it, and they're changing how your DNS works. Meaning, and DNS is the service that says, oh, google.com is here, and my company network is here, and disney.com or amazon.com or Washington Post or Disney, I'm giving you real sites that they've altered the addresses for, that basically give a mock page pretty close to what the user was expecting, right? I go to disney.com, I'm expecting a website that looks like disney.com, and indeed this one does, except in those sites, wherever you're clicking, it's actually got malware in those fake websites, and it's injecting some malware down to your machine. It's called, this particular variant is called Lily, and it communicates with a command and control server that's out there in the internet. So at that point, they really own your machine, and they're simply communicating a few details out to a command and control. But your router is not going to get any better from there forward to suddenly start notifying you. Oh yeah, now I'm starting to talk to a bad website through command and control. So one of the areas we would look to for this is, where are your machines communicating to? And internet health, we're going to talk more about internet routing, but in general, there's a solution for this, for DNS health and outsourcing your DNS rather than having it come from your router, which is obviously modifiable. Having a safe DNS protecting zone, we use something called Umbrella, especially for our customers that are on our protected systems. And Umbrella means that your DNS essentially can't be hijacked, and also your browsers can't hit malicious websites. Your applications can't talk to command and control sites, because it's being blocked as part of the DNS sequence and safe DNS. So just a thought, I guess, regarding home networks. And here's another one, and I guess I'll go back a slide. At the bottom, and I have no intention for you to actually see this, there's a gentleman out there, a researcher, that is just kind of watching attacks, and this one came out about a week and a half ago here, but he's watching an attack, and he illustrates at super geek level. And if you want to geek out about home networks and how they're vulnerable, feel free. This is a talk about how a PDF file is really looks like a PDF file. A user wouldn't know the difference. They open it. Really inside is a LNK file, which is a common file for Microsoft. They open it, and in addition to the PDF showing you some stuff around coronavirus, which might be some details you're interested in, there's also, 6 or 8 other files that came down to your machine during that same sequence. So it's showing you one thing and downloading a few others in the background. And then, it goes over and uses some encrypted VBS. VBS can be any kind of code you want, but encrypt it just to make it even more secure. And then it takes advantage of Office 2010 and Office 2007 code, which is likely resident, right? These home networks and home devices likely have some older Office, right? So in any case, it's a sequence of things just to kind of talk about how this can be taken advantage of. But he made 3 notes that I thought were interesting. And I thought, let's see if these are true for you. And if not for you, maybe your employees, or maybe you don't know. Maybe there's just not a lot of knowledge regarding what machines people are running, and at least they're up and functional, and that's good. But equation number 2 is how do we get them more secure? So number 1, are they behind? These home devices are usually not behind firewalls and IPS systems like they were at the corporate. The firewalling might not even be turned on the router. At a minimum, all the router is doing is something called NAT, or translating the single home address onto an internet address, which provides just the most basic of protection. But firewalling and IPS systems are likely not in place. Older Word programs, right? You have no idea sometimes what those home devices have running on them, and whether, even if it's Word 2010, it might be Word 2010 basic without the many patches that had occurred since then. And then most obviously don't have managed AV or patching. It's kind of left up to the end user. Run some Defender, right? You can tell them to do that, but they don't know if it's running or not running, or if it's up to date and so forth. So, the points here are, patch your endpoints, take control of those. For Office, you're entitled to, as part of Office 365, install Office on those machines. Show the users how that can be installed. It's really just a simple click. If you're licensed for it, they can install it on up to 5 machines, including their corporate device and potentially home devices and other home devices. And then obviously, as a reminder, just know that any VPN tunnel, I always equate it with just kind of taking a network cable right out of your data center and pulling it to your house, and you're plugging it in. So whatever state that device is in is now part of your network. So as IT admins, know the security, health, and posture of all the devices that are connecting into your network. So a few stories, I guess, on that. Moving on to COVID websites. I just took the article title and just put it right on the screen here because I think that kind of tells the story, right? The March 18th article out of ZDNet. A lot of sites being used. Most sites being used are these ones that are getting created, and they're at 3,600 sites in a 3-day period were created. So we're talking about 1,000 sites per day being created around coronavirus. A vast majority of them are used for the purpose of hosting phishing attacks, distributing malware-laced files, financial fraud, or for tricking users into paying for fake COVID cures, supplements, or vaccines. So that's a direct quote. So it just provides thousands of new vectors for attacks. You can imagine things like the WHO. Who knows the WHO website, by heart? It's just not something we went to with a lot of frequency beforehand. Or the CDC, right? If I was to type, WHO.com, that could be it, but actually it's a WHO. So the WHO actually put out some guidance and said, hey, we're only going to send you emails that say from at who.int. It's not an email I get quite often, but if someone was from WHO, you wouldn't really know as a user to distinguish the difference. So new sources of authority is another, thing that kind of gets layered on here. And, so I guess my point is there's lots of malware as I kind of build that out. This is an example of a, hey, some refunds can be for your travel expenses and so forth, because you can't travel, click here, those sorts of things. Those are going to be rampant, right? They're happening all over the time and pointing to people to websites that are inappropriate at this time. There's even a good one here. People are putting out software updates. These end users, they're not accustomed to doing patching. You did the patching on their machines before. Are you still doing them now? Look at this Adobe Flash Player. Might be out of date. Who would click that button? You know, update, download Flash. I mean, that button is nothing but a mask for a completely rampant piece of malware and or ransomware that occurs on there. And by the way, that ransomware that occurs on your device might go right through your VPN tunnel and infect your network. How does that layer on top of these security findings at this time? So this is definitely not a time to skimp on employee awareness training. There's obviously, some new vectors for the education and testing. We do that kind of stuff for $2 per user per employee per month or less. So, take us up on the offer if you don't have a process for yourself. And then, the malware installation. This is not a time to allow users to make decisions about what to install or what to not install. You should be responsible for endpoint patching if you can. Again, we do that stuff for $1 or $2 a month per machine as part of some of our packaging. So really kind of inexpensive relative to the security risk. All right, virus spread. This takes on multiple meanings here. Obviously, we're in a pandemic at this point, and a virus is spreading. But the last thing we need is viruses spreading throughout our network. And so, it's probably difficult to find a person who hasn't looked at a map, something like this, and maybe even this specific map, which happens to be the Johns Hopkins University of Medicine map. This map has been so popular, in fact, that a lot of people want to get access to this information, right? It's interesting. I think it uses Power BI on the background. And I took an image of it this morning as an example, just to kind of drop into the slide deck. And because it's fascinating and because it draws attention, people want to get access to this. Well, lo and behold, the Russians come along, and several weeks ago, they sold a digital coronavirus infection kit that uses this map that you're looking at right here. The story is kind of detailed by Krebs on March 12th. Sells the coronavirus infection kit that uses that map. It either costs $200 or $700, and it completely uses the real data from this website and produces its own map. So you're looking at a website called, abc.com, and it's got the full map and it's got the latest details, just like you see on my screen now, except they just modify the code a little bit of Java code, and you get to inject whatever loader you'd like into this interactive experience. And so they pretty much own your machine. By you looking at this map, which is not from an authoritative source, but actually has the data from the authoritative source, they own your machine. They basically can be doing what they want in terms of the scripting. So again, this is another case where DNS protection, internet filtering, and making sure that you're hitting sites that have been approved, if you will, and approved by a service that has many sites, 3,600 new sites per day to catalog is either good, bad, or good or avoid, basically. So you need to get to a method where if it's connected, it's protected. No malicious sites, no phishing links, no apps talking to command and control, and you can really only do that with something that's evaluating where you're going, even if your machine's not in corporate, right? And that's something as a service that we've offered and would evangelize under Cisco umbrella products. All right, taking that same map, they also have capabilities to spread this through not only capabilities for browsers, but also for phones. So Android users are getting text messages saying, download this app to keep up to date on the coronavirus. Well, great. You get this interactive map, and here's all this information. Unfortunately, by downloading that app, there are about 30 of them, they said at this point, they're leveraging something called SpyMax, which is some commercial spyware available, acquired online by anyone with an internet connection for free. They develop the app, it grabs the data, shows it to you, and they can leverage your smartphone camera, listen to you through your microphone, or pilfer all your text messages. These are some potential uses that they suggest in their selling video as to why and how to take advantage of this kit. So more things to take advantage of, but you'll notice that Forbes article is just a few days after they said, watch out for maps being stolen, and sure enough, they're being stolen and proliferated on Android systems. I love the reach out that communities are doing relative to teddy bears, right? I think you've hopefully seen some stories. Teddy bears are being used and kind of being put in windows of neighborhoods so that kids kind of go by as they're doing more walks nowadays, and either they're looking for the bear in the window or they're looking for other animals. There was a good story on the news the other night for that. And in general, teddy bears are kind of being put in windows also to say thanks to healthcare workers and everybody take care. And unfortunately, it's on this note that I also tell you about the FBI warning. Really kind of I can only imagine this is not going to impact many of us, but just look at how this comes along, where effectively they're taking teddy bears and also sending along USB keys, or the teddy bear has a USB key tail, and they're sending this to people's homes. They're sending it to retail gaming industries were the initial attacks, but they're sending us through the United States Postal Service. The packages include items like teddy bears and gift cards, working in HR, IT, or executive management roles with the goal of plugging those in and as a thank you, obviously the intention to provide malware. So great, just what we needed, right? Just when we have something good like teddy bears, they come back to haunt us a little bit. But this is a repeat slide. Won't go into a ton of detail on it, but from last month, you'll recall, and even in January, we had some conversations regarding Citrix, which commonly is used as a technology for leveraging remote access. There was a patch that allowed a fair amount of exposure through their application gateways, or delivery controllers, as they call them, and it needs a patch, right? Those patches that are there, we went through some extensive exercises with, I don't know, 4 or 5 customers to patch their Citrix farms with this. As you can see, it's widely used. Now, interestingly enough, the password spraying that was used for them was how they got attacked back in 2018 or 2019. And password spraying was certainly just taking a dictionary of really decent passwords and throwing it against a database of logins and saying, okay, we got 10 hits here, and now we have 10 known credentials that we can go in and begin our lateral movements to go find someone with the highest level of privileges. So just note that, keep your technologies that are at the front line where people are connecting up to date. Conference calls. We're all doing these conference calls nowadays. This certainly wins the coolest name award in terms of the vulnerability, but this is called Zoom bombing. Okay. This story just came out yesterday. FBI is reporting that a lot of schools that are leveraging conferencing are being disrupted by either pornographic, hate images, or threatening language. How is this happening? Okay, it's not necessarily a vulnerability in software itself, although there have been some reports of, it is another piece of software that needs updating, let's just state, whether it be Zoom, Teams, or otherwise. In one case, swastikas and scary imagery was used in a conference call, and in another, a hacker yelled a profanity, then shouted the teacher's home address during the instruction. So, the tips that are provided by the vendors, whether they be Microsoft, Zoom, or other conferencing platforms, GoToMeeting and so forth, make these private, not public, okay? And what that means is invite by email address. Don't just provide a URL and say, click here. Okay, provide by URL, click here, invites anyone. And it certainly makes it easy to join the call, but again, there's no security to it. So it's, again, that practical move from let's get functional to let's get functional and secure. And I think we really, need to kind of turn that tide here quickly. Obviously, don't take those links and post them on websites or social forums. There's an app sharing. So right now, Samantha and I are presenters, and nobody else could present on our screen. That type of feature is available in many platforms. So take advantage of the fact that you have delineations between that. So either teacher, student, or otherwise, you don't get into situations about special hosts, unintended hosts. You can lock the meetings to new participants, which doesn't seem very good for someone joining late. Suddenly it's locked, but that's an option. Muting participants disabling file transfer, those are pretty common options. But I think the one thing I noted here also was that the host password, right, to a lot of these systems, if that gets rooted, it could be guessed, phished, or purchased, that becomes a problem, right, for your conference calls. So authentication is really a big theme, and that kind of takes us into our next, I took one more screen print there just for you, but that gets us into our, our almost our second to last topic here, authentication. And this is a big one. This certainly is not just present here with COVID. I would have given you the same slide a month ago, but I think it becomes even more appropriate as time moves on here. You have a lot of people logging onto your network from remote nowadays, maybe more so than you had before. They're coming in through new channels. They oftentimes have loose authentication standards where your VPN has separate authentication than your Active Directory, things of that nature. You're not auditing. And along comes this fun fact. Okay. While you're leveraging your Office 365, which is using Azure Active Directory under the hood, 0.5% are compromised every month. Okay, what does that mean? That means if you have 200 users in your company, expect a compromise this month. If you only have 50 users, expect a compromise this quarter. Expect a compromise. That's the messaging Microsoft is giving to you. And the second message they give to you, I'll let you read it. If it's compromised, there's 99.9% chance that it did not have MFA. Protect your accounts, okay? I will just state that we, how does this happen? I guess you might be your first question. Wait, these, I put my accounts and my trust into Microsoft. No, you've got logins and passwords up in Microsoft, and they'll keep those logins and passwords in a secure location. However, out on the dark web, you've got password spraying, so meaning I'll use a database of usernames and logins with statistically probable passwords, such as 123 or password. I'll run it over your accounts, and oh, lo and behold, I got 3 logins and password information. So password spraying is 40% of how they do it. Another 40% comes from password replay, meaning they look at data breaches that occurred out on the web, and they take those same login credentials and they try it against your Office 365, and oh, good, the user used the same login, the same password at home as at network or at their work. That's great. So that's the other 40%. And the 20% is phishing. Okay, so it's happening. There's methods for them to get it, and I would just say it's absolutely confirmed by what we see on our managed services desk. We monitor a couple thousand mailboxes, and we see about 4 compromises a month, okay, or 1 a week. Well, we have 1,000, so that's kind of the rate we would expect, maybe 4 times what you might have, but in any case, it's happening. And so now is the time for a systemic, one-time review of maybe 60 variables with regards to your Office 365, and on a daily basis, looking at 20 variables, including logins, foreign logins, Amazon-based logins, strange logins that are taking emails and putting things into your RSS folder, RDP ports that are suddenly opening up on your network, which is typically a method for future ransomware. We look at all that stuff on a daily basis, and we do that as part of our security review for Office 365. So not a very expensive service, and something I think that would be logical to kind of fall on a service like ours to do something like that. And the last story I have is regarding Windows 10. I think our timing's pretty good. This is just an update that occurred. It's unfortunate that Microsoft had a problem here with this is Windows 1903 and 1909, their latest versions of Windows 10, but there's an inaccurate positioning of your connectivity to the internet for VPN users, and they ask you to install this patch effectively that helps it not display the wrong internet connection when you're connecting or disconnecting from a VPN, and or not even being able to connect at all. So imagine some home users that no longer can get to Office 365 and so forth. So pay special attention to that patch. All right, in closing, just want to point out that our website has been updated. We've got a coronavirus latest news and tips area, which obviously talks about our statements and our intention to, fully support. Our doors are fully open. Not our proverbial doors are fully open to service our customers. We've had a lot of work recently that we're engaging in. We've put some isolated and focused blogs, we thought, on that page for you to kind of re-educate yourself. Our solutions relative to remote access and security are focused on that webpage, as well as some of the scams that we talked about today will be listed on that webpage. So we try to do a few things under there. We're trying to communicate with customers as much as possible. Obviously, today we had our This Month in Cyber. Tomorrow we've got at 11 o'clock also, we've got just a relatively open discussion about how to do remote access or how to do telephones and kind of some of the work we've been doing recently. We're going to take 15 minutes to maybe talk about a solution or two, and then we're going to take the other 15 minutes just for some Q&A and open forum around questions or problems you're having. Think of it as free consulting if you want, but it's really just to engage in conversations about what challenges you're having and how might we, or maybe as a community, we try and get that solved. And on Thursday, as an example, we have our last in a 4-part webinar series on Teams and how to do security with Teams, how to lock it down, stay focused, and what are some of the settings, so that not everybody's doing everything within Teams, and you have sprawl and things of that nature. So just a couple events that we have this week, let alone coming up in the future. I won't nauseate with all those, but go to our website, peters.com events, and you'll see additional ones. And I'm going to skip by this, but the point I guess I wanted to mention is if you have any interest in some free trials of some of the things we discussed today, a phishing test to kind of baseline your organization, vulnerability scan, or even that security review for Office 365, we're willing to do that stuff for free and just kind of get it tried, see if it can provide a service for you and if it works for your environment. So those are our offers that existed before coronavirus, and they'll exist afterwards. But if they're particularly relevant for you now, I ask you to try them. And with that, I think I'm going to call it a close. I apologize for being a minute or two late here. So if there are questions, Samantha, fire them up, or I guess I can look in the Q&A panel myself too. Certainly anyone is allowed to come off mute if they have it too.
I was talking to myself on mute, huh?
Okay. Oh. Yeah, I don't see any questions.
I'm just, yeah, exactly. That's just what I was about to say.
All right, perfect. Well, certainly great for you to attend, and look forward to having a conversation with you soon. Thank you all.
Thanks for joining, everybody.